5 children vanished from the Sodder home on Christmas Eve, 1945, after a fire ripped through their Fayetteville residence. When the flames subsided, George and Jenny Sodder desperately searched through the debris, but 5 of their 9 children were simply gone. What became of them? Fayetteville, West Virginia, Christmas Eve, 1945. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke, a gentle blanket of fresh snow muffling the sounds of a town preparing for joy. Inside the 2-story home of George and Jenny Sodder, 11 children buzzed with anticipation. 9 of them were home that night, their laughter echoing through the rooms, dreams of Santa and presents dancing in their heads. The youngest, Sylvia, was just 2. The oldest present, Maurice, was 14. Christmas was a time of warmth, of family, of cherished traditions. That night, the Sodders, like countless families across America, were immersed in the simple, profound happiness of the season. But beneath the surface of this festive tranquility, an insidious threat was stirring. As the evening wound down, George and Jenny settled their excited brood. Maurice, Louis, Martha, Jenny, and Betty, the 5 youngest, were sent to bed early. The older children stayed up a little longer, playing with new toys on the first floor. Around 1 a.m., a phone call, quickly dismissed as a wrong number, briefly interrupted the quiet. Soon after, a thud on the roof. Then, a smell. The faint, acrid scent of smoke began to permeate the festive air, swiftly growing stronger. Suddenly, a cry ripped through the silence, "Fire!" Jenny awoke to smoke filling her bedroom. Downstairs, flames licked up the walls, consuming the Christmas tree, devouring the very heart of their celebration. Panic erupted. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children Marion, George Jr., John, and Sylvia managed to escape through a first-floor window. But the stairs were an inferno. The 5 youngest children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were trapped on the second floor. George frantically tried to get back inside, his hands burned, his cries swallowed by the roar of the blaze. The ladder was gone. The water barrels were frozen. Attempts to start his truck to reach the windows failed. Helplessly, the Sodders watched in horror as their home, their world, burned around them, the screams of their children, they believed, still echoing from within. The night had promised joy, but delivered only terror, leaving behind not just a charred ruin, but an inexplicable, agonizing void. In the heart of Fayetteville, West Virginia, a family thrived, embodying the very spirit of the American dream. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who arrived in the States as a teenager, had built a life from sheer grit and determination. From humble beginnings, he established a successful trucking business, hauling coal and supplies across the rugged Appalachian landscape, a testament to his relentless work ethic. Beside him stood Jenny, an American-born woman whose strength and grace anchored their bustling household. A meticulous homemaker, her garden overflowed with bounty, and her kitchen was perpetually filled with the aromas of home-cooked meals, a symbol of their prosperity and warmth. Together, George and Jenny brought 10 children into the world, a vibrant, boisterous brood that filled their 2-story frame house on the outskirts of town with laughter, music, and the endless energy of youth. From the eldest, John, to the youngest, Sylvia, the Sodder children were a familiar sight, running errands, playing games, and contributing to the lively pulse of the community. They were known and respected, not just as George and Jenny's kids, but as individuals carving out their own places in Fayetteville. This wasn't just a family, it was a small, self-sufficient universe, deeply intertwined with the fabric of their small town. Their home was a hub, a place where neighbors were always welcome, where the sounds of children playing echoed through the trees, a beacon of life and activity. They were a picture of resilience and prosperity, a testament to what hard work could build. But as Christmas Eve of 1945 approached, the sheer scale of their family, the vibrancy of their everyday existence, would only amplify the unimaginable horror that awaited them. What kind of future was stolen from these 10 children? What vibrant lives were about to be extinguished or, perhaps even more chillingly, simply vanish? The quiet of Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was not merely a prelude to festive cheer for the Sodder family, it was a canvas upon which a series of unsettling events would be painted, each stroke deepening a sense of unease. Around 12:30 a.m., just hours before the blaze, a shrill phone call pierced the stillness. Jenny Sodder answered to a strange woman's voice asking for a name she didn't recognize, followed by an unnerving, almost mocking laugh, and then abrupt silence. Jenny, disturbed, hung up, only to discover the house lights were suddenly, inexplicably out. George Sodder, ever the protector, went outside to investigate. He found the main power line, which fed into their home, cleanly cut. This wasn't a random outage, it was deliberate. As he reconnected the line in the biting winter air, a dark car idled nearby on the road, its occupants unseen but undeniably present, watching. The engine rumbled softly before the vehicle slowly pulled away into the night, leaving George with a cold dread that had little to do with the weather. These weren't isolated incidents. For months, a palpable tension had surrounded the Sodder household. George, an outspoken Italian immigrant with strong, anti-Mussolini sentiments and socialist leanings, had made enemies in the conservative, tight-knit community. His opinions were not always welcome, and threats had been made. Just weeks prior, an aggressive insurance salesman, angered by George's refusal to buy a policy, had chillingly warned him that his house was going to go up in smoke and his children were going to be destroyed. He even added, "You Italian dago." A menacing statement that resonated deeply now. Another time, George found a truck driver watching his children and heard him remark, "Your children are often good for nothing, but they'll be gone with the smoke." Now, as the embers cooled, these sinister prophecies seemed to coalesce into something far more sinister than coincidence. Were these truly random acts of malice, or were they deliberate, calculated steps in a terrifying plan that would soon engulf the Sodder family in an unimaginable nightmare? The inferno roared, a ravenous beast devouring the Sodder home. George Sodder, driven by a primal paternal instinct, fought against it with every fiber of his being. He sprinted back towards the engulfed house, desperate to reach the children still trapped within. He tried the front door, but the heat was an unbearable, physical barrier. He ran to the side, yelling, smashing windows, only to be met by a suffocating blast of smoke and searing air that pushed him back, singeing his hair and clothes. His ladder, usually leaning against the house, was inexplicably missing nowhere to be found. Frantically, he scrambled to his cold truck, intending to use it to reach an upper window, but the engine, a reliable workhorse just hours before, inexplicably refused to start. It sputtered, coughed, then died, leaving George to stare in disbelief as precious seconds evaporated. Outside, 4-year-old Sylvia, the youngest of the children who made it out, clung to her mother, Jenny, as they watched the horror unfold. The 3 other children who escaped, John, George Jr., and Marion, stood aghast. But the sounds from above, the terrified screams that pierced the night, slowly faded into a horrifying silence. Jenny, frantic, called out for help, her voice raw with terror. Neighbors, roused by the terrifying glow and Jenny's desperate pleas, rushed to assist, forming a futile bucket brigade. But their efforts were heartbreakingly inadequate against the raging conflagration. The wooden house, fueled by its own timbers and contents, became a roaring pyre, collapsing in on itself as dawn began to creep over the horizon. As the flames finally subsided, casting an eerie gray light on the smoldering ruins, the horrific truth began to solidify. Once the embers cooled enough to permit a closer look, the horrifying count began. 9 children were supposed to be home that night. 4 had escaped. 5 were unaccounted for: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr., and Betty. The names echoed in the cold morning air, a chilling litany of absence. George and the neighbors, despite the danger, sifted through the still smoking debris, their hope dwindling with every charred beam. There were no bodies, no bones, no discernible remains. Nothing. How could a raging house fire consume 5 children so completely, leaving not a trace? And if they weren't in the ashes, where on earth were the Sodder children? As the first rays of morning light touched the still smoking ruins of the Sodder home, what should have been a meticulous search for answers quickly devolved into a series of catastrophic missteps. Local authorities, ill-equipped and seemingly overwhelmed by the scale of the tragedy, approached the scene with a bewildering lack of thoroughness. Their initial response was characterized by a casualness that would haunt the Sodder family for decades, fueling their deepest fears and suspicions. Just hours after the inferno, Fire Marshal F.J. Morris arrived. His investigation was astonishingly brief, lasting mere minutes. He quickly concluded the blaze was caused by faulty wiring, a theory he clung to despite glaring inconsistencies, and, more disturbingly, declared all 5 missing children dead, their bodies utterly consumed by the flames. This pronouncement, made without a single identifiable human remain, without a thorough sifting of the ashes, was a chilling testament to the rush to judgment that permeated the entire immediate aftermath. But the most egregious act, the one that cemented the family's burgeoning suspicions, occurred just days later. Before a proper forensic examination could even be contemplated, a bulldozer was dispatched to the site. Its massive blade tore through the debris, scooping up earth, ash, and any potential evidence, and dumping it into a nearby ravine. It was a grotesque act of desecration, an irreversible destruction of what should have been treated as a potential crime scene. Any chance of finding definitive answers, of distinguishing bone from ash, of unearthing clues to the children's fate, was buried under tons of dirt and bureaucratic indifference. The decision to clear the site so hastily effectively sealed off any path to a definitive conclusion. With the scene obliterated, the official narrative became immutable: the children perished in the fire. But for George and Jenny Sodder, and for a nation watching their nightmare unfold, the official story left an unbearable void. If the children were truly incinerated, why was there no trace, not a single tooth, not a fragment of bone? And why, in the chaotic aftermath of such a profound tragedy, was the most crucial evidence so carelessly, almost deliberately, erased? The answers, if they existed, now lay buried, leaving the Sodder family to wonder, what exactly were they trying to hide? Yet, as the smoke cleared and the initial shock began to settle, a new, far more unsettling mystery began to emerge from the charred ruins of the Sodder home. The inferno had been absolute, reducing the 2-story structure to little more than a cellar filled with ash and debris. Rescuers, then the family themselves, sifted through the smoldering remains, their hearts heavy with dread, searching for any trace of the 5 missing children. They expected, grimly, to find bones. Human bones, even after the most devastating fires, are remarkably resilient. They don't simply vanish. But they did. Day after agonizing day, shovel after shovel, nothing. Not a single fragment of bone. No teeth, no skull fragments, no discernible human remains whatsoever. This absence was not merely perplexing, it defied established scientific understanding. Experts in fire forensics and anthropology confirm that while extreme heat can reduce bones, it rarely vaporizes them entirely, especially in a typical house fire. Even in professional crematories, where temperatures soar far beyond what a residential blaze can achieve for sustained periods, identifiable bone fragments always remain, requiring mechanical pulverization into what we call ashes. The Sodder fire, while intense, was not an industrial furnace. The official explanation that the children's bodies were completely incinerated was a difficult pill for the Sodder family to swallow, and for good reason. How could a domestic fire, no matter how fierce, utterly eradicate every trace of 5 human bodies, leaving behind only the melted remnants of household appliances and the carbonized remains of furniture? This glaring contradiction between the physical evidence, or lack thereof, and conventional understanding fueled a deep-seated suspicion. It laid the groundwork for a belief that the children had not perished in the flames at all, but had somehow been removed, spirited away before the fire truly took hold. This unsettling absence of remains became the pivot point, turning a tragic accident into an enduring enigma, a question mark hanging heavy over the future of the investigation, and the Sodder family's relentless quest for truth.
Stop for a moment. Based on what you've just heard, what do you think really happened here? Drop your theory in the comments below. We read every single one.
The ashes had barely cooled, the official pronouncements had been made, yet for Jenny Sodder, the fire itself was not the most chilling mystery. A mother's intuition, sharp and unyielding, whispered of something far more sinister than a tragic accident. Day after painstaking day, she sifted through the debris of what was once her home, not just with her hands, but with her very soul. And what she found or rather, what she emphatically didn't find screamed louder than any witness. There were no charred bones. No lingering, acrid smell of burning flesh that should have haunted the entire neighborhood. Just a perplexing void where 5 young lives should have been reduced to ash. This profound absence became the bedrock of her own terrifying theory: her children were not in the house when it burned. Her mind raced back to the night's eerie precursors. The cut phone line, discovered only when she desperately tried to call for help, an impossible coincidence. The heavy, aluminum ladder, usually propped against the house, inexplicably vanished just when it was needed most to rescue the trapped children. And earlier that very night, a peculiar incident, a strange car, its occupants watching the house intently, then driving away into the darkness. For Jenny, these weren't mere anomalies, they were signposts, pointing away from accidental tragedy and towards deliberate orchestration. While the authorities clung to their narrative of a devastating, albeit complete, fire, Jenny built her own case, fueled by a mother's desperate logic and an unwavering belief that her children had been abducted before the flames ever touched their beds. But if they weren't in the house, if they were abducted, who would commit such a heinous act on Christmas Eve, and why? The ashes cooled, but for George and Jenny Sodder, the inferno of doubt still raged. As the initial investigations faltered and official channels ran dry, their resolve hardened into an unshakable conviction: their children were not gone. They were missing. Decades would pass, but the Sodders refused to let the world forget. Their most enduring testament to this refusal was a simple, yet profound, roadside billboard erected on U.S. Route 60, just outside Fayetteville, West Virginia. Against a stark white background, the smiling faces of Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty stared out, eternally young, forever frozen in time. Below them, a haunting plea: missing. Sodder children. Information wanted. For years, it stood as a silent scream into the West Virginia landscape, a constant, agonizing reminder not just for the family, but for every passerby. It was a beacon of their hope, a monument to their agony, and a direct challenge to the silence that had swallowed their children. But the Sodders didn't just wait for answers, they chased them. Private investigators, often working pro bono or at the Sodders' significant personal expense, crisscrossed the country. Leads, often tenuous, sometimes outright cruel, sent them down countless rabbit holes. From anonymous tips claiming sightings in St. Louis to enigmatic letters from Florida, each potential clue, no matter how remote, reignited a flicker of hope before often dissolving into dust. The search became George and Jenny's life's work, consuming their finances, their energy, and ultimately, their very being. They chased shadows, followed whispers, and endured the painful cycle of anticipation and disappointment, all fueled by a parent's unbreakable love. But after decades, with the billboard weathered and their own faces lined with age and grief, a tantalizing lead would emerge, one that defied all rational explanation and promised to either expose the truth or deepen the mystery even further. Could a single, grainy photograph finally hold the key to the Sodder children's fate? The billboard, a desperate plea etched against the West Virginia sky, was just one manifestation of the Sodder family's relentless search. After the initial investigation faltered, George and Jenny refused to let their children fade into memory. They poured their meager savings into advertising, fueling a new kind of pursuit, the chase after phantom sightings. Each passing year brought a fresh wave of tips, a deluge of letters and phone calls from every corner of the nation. A child with unusual eyes in a distant town, a group of youngsters resembling the lost siblings working at a roadside diner, a fleeting glimpse in a crowded streetcar. Every single lead, no matter how tenuous, ignited a spark of hope. Perhaps the most compelling of these early tips came from St. Louis, Missouri. A frantic call detailed children matching the Sodders' descriptions, seemingly living with a mysterious couple. George Sodder, his heart pounding with a father's desperate anticipation, immediately traveled to investigate. Days turned into agonizing weeks as he followed every possible thread, interviewing witnesses, scrutinizing photographs. The promise of reunion hung heavy in the air, a tantalizing mirage. But like so many before it, this lead ultimately dissolved into nothing, a cruel echo of what might have been, leaving George to return to Fayette County, his hopes once again shattered. The geographical reach of these alleged sightings stretched far beyond St. Louis. Reports surfaced from Florida, from New York, from Texas. A continent-wide game of emotional cat and mouse. For Jenny, the constant cycle of anticipation and crushing disappointment was a torment. Each new letter, each unexpected phone call, ripped open the wound anew, forcing her to relive the nightmare of that Christmas Eve. She would pore over blurry photographs, searching for a familiar curve of a smile, a characteristic tilt of a head. Most claims were unsubstantiated, born of mistaken identity, wishful thinking, or sometimes, tragically, cynical opportunism. Yet, the Sodders could never afford to ignore a single one, for what if, just what if, one of them held the truth? What if, amongst the countless shadows, a real child was hiding in plain sight? 2 decades had withered away since the Christmas Eve fire, yet for Jenny Sodder, the embers of hope still glowed, fueled by an unwavering Mother-S instinct. Then, in the spring of 1967, a small, unassuming package arrived at her West Virginia home, addressed simply to Mrs. Jenny Sodder. Inside, tucked amidst the plain wrapping, was a photograph. It was a man, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to stare directly from the past. On the back, an inscription in handwritten script, Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. Jenny Sodder, who had meticulously studied every photograph of her missing children, every composite sketch, every grainy newsprint image, recognized him instantly. It was Louis. Her Louis. Older, yes, but the features, the gaze they were unmistakable. The envelope bore a Kentucky postmark, suggesting a new lead, a tangible thread in the decades-long tangle of speculation. George and Jenny, their hearts pounding with a mixture of terror and elation, immediately contacted the authorities, convinced this was the breakthrough they had prayed for. The FBI, who had periodically reviewed the case, were again drawn into the Sodder mystery. They took possession of the photograph, subjecting it to forensic analysis, comparing it against childhood pictures of Louis. Experts meticulously examined the facial structure, the ear shape, the subtle nuances that define a human identity. Yet, despite the compelling resemblance and the fervent belief of the Sodder parents, the official conclusion was frustratingly inconclusive. They could neither confirm nor definitively deny that the man in the photo was Louis Sodder. The sender, shrouded in anonymity, never came forward. The mysterious package, a beacon of potential truth, instead became another layer of enigma, deepening the shadow over the Sodder children's fate. Was this a cruel hoax, another heartless prank in a long line of false hopes? Or was it a genuine cry for help, a tentative reach from a son who couldn't fully reveal himself. The photograph, a tangible piece of evidence, offered a glimpse into an adult Louis Sodder, living a life somewhere, perhaps under a different name, but it failed to provide the answers his desperate family craved. Was this the closest they ever came to finding him, only to have the truth slip through their fingers once more? The smoke had barely cleared before the whispers began to circulate through the valleys of Fayetteville. This was no tragic accident, it was a calculated act of malice. George Sodder was a man of strong convictions, a self-made immigrant who ran a successful trucking business, but success in mid-century America often came with dangerous shadows. In the local coal country, rumors swirled of protection rackets and extortion. Did George refuse to pay tribute to local mobsters, turning his thriving enterprise into a target? The threats had been tangible. Months before the fire, a life insurance salesman had warned George that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed because of his outspoken, anti-Mussolini political views. In an Italian-American community rife with wartime tensions, those words carried a deadly weight. But political grudges were only one piece of a darker puzzle. Some pointed to a far more sinister industry operating in the shadows of post-war America: child trafficking. Could the 5 Sodder children have been stolen to order, whisked away in the dead of night to be sold to wealthy, unsuspecting families through corrupt adoption rings? It was a terrifying prospect, suggesting a network of conspirators who knew exactly how to execute a kidnapping under the cover of a devastating blaze. Whether driven by a local vendetta, a business dispute gone bloodily wrong, or the cold-blooded greed of organized crime, the theories of foul play all pointed to a single, haunting conclusion: someone wanted to punish George Sodder by stripping away his very future. Yet, as the family chased these dark leads into the criminal underworld, they were left to wonder who held the ultimate authority over that fateful night. But what if the key to the entire mystery lay not in the shadows of the mafia, but in the official records of the very people sworn to protect them? As the decades slowly marched on, the roaring flames of 1945 faded into a cold, quiet ash, but for the surviving Sodder children, the smoke never truly cleared. At the heart of this enduring, painful vigil stood Sylvia Sodder Paxton. She was just a toddler on that devastating Christmas Eve, barely 2 years old, yet she grew up in a household permanently suspended in grief. She watched her beloved parents, George and Jenny, spend their final breaths chasing ghosts, and when they passed away, the heavy mantle of the search fell squarely onto her shoulders. For Sylvia, this was never just a historical mystery or a true crime curiosity, it was a deeply personal, lifelong mission to find the brothers and sisters she never got to know. The empty chairs at the holiday table weren't abstract symbolseuros, they were a constant, aching silence that echoed through generations of the Sodder family. As the years turned into decades, the other surviving siblings slowly passed on, leaving Sylvia as the absolute last living witness to the tragedy, the final guardian of a flame that refused to die. She meticulously kept the files, maintained the endless correspondence, and answered the late-night calls from theorists and researchers, carrying the crushing emotional weight of the unknown with a quiet, fierce determination. This is a profound, generational trauma, passed down like an heirloom of sorrow, forcing the question of what truly happened to Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty to persist into the 21st century. But as Sylvia's own life eventually reached its twilight, a chilling realization took hold. If the last direct link to that fateful night were to fade away, would the truth of the Sodder children be lost to the shadows forever, or is there one final, explosive revelation waiting to be unearthed? The Appalachian winds still sweep through Fayetteville, West Virginia, carrying with them the cold, unresolved ash of a Christmas Eve that refused to end. Decades have passed since the flames consumed the Sodder home, yet the void left in their wake remains as vast as the night sky. What began as a local tragedy has calcified into one of America's most haunting enigmas, a stark monument to the limitations of human justice. We are left to confront an unsettling truth: that sometimes, the institutions sworn to protect and seek the truth can fail so spectacularly that the truth itself becomes a casualty. But the story of the Sodder children is not merely one of systemic failure or sinister conspiracies. It is, at its beating heart, a testament to the terrifying, beautiful scope of a familiar's devotion. George and Jenny Sodder, and the children who survived them, refused to let the world forget. They turned their private grief into a public crusade, proving that love does not surrender to bureaucratic apathy or the passage of time. They chased ghosts across continents, spent fortunes on whispers, and erected billboards that stared down travelers for generations, demanding answers from a silent universe. The billboard is gone now, the soil has been paved over, and the voices of those who fought so hard to find Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty have finally fallen silent. Yet, the mystery refuses to die. It lingers in the shadow of Fayetteville, challenging our belief in closure and reminding us that some wounds never heal, they only fade into legend. As we look back at the ashes of 1945, we are forced to ask ourselves, in a world where 5 children can vanish into thin air without a trace, how safe are the walls we build around our own lives, and what truth still lies buried beneath the soil of Fayetteville, waiting for someone new to dig it up?
Before you go, if this story held your attention all the way to the end, hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and for a channel like ours, it genuinely makes a difference. Subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next. Every week, another case the world couldn't close. And here's the part we mean most, the next story we dig into could come from you. Drop in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster you want us to investigate. We read every single suggestion. The cases that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.